I have to wonder how many people haven't noticed. The trend has been noticeable to me for some time, to say the least. When you have an event in history that relates to something you don't want folks to remember or celebrate, one of a set of tools is used to, as it were, change the narrative with regard to that thing. I have no standing name for this practice, but I think obfuscation covers it fairly well. Hello and welcome to the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt. Today is Sunday, the 17th of January, 2021. Welcome to everybody who's viewing me on Rumble, viewing me on YouTube, or listening to me on the podcast. Thank you for coming along, and hopefully I'll present something that you'll find worth paying attention to. The subject for today's little talk and video and so forth is obfuscating history. And what I sort of wanted to do was give examples, particularly from Christian history, from Christianity, where things have been, over the course of time, modified to make it so that they're nothing like what the things that they were intended to represent or be about, or what they actually did. Okay, and I'm going to start with the concept of, and I meant to look this up and I didn't, but of BC and CE as opposed to, or excuse me, BCE and CE as opposed to BC and AD. Anybody who knows very much knows that BC is a very simple acronym that stands for before Christ, and that AD is a slightly more complicated acronym that stands for Anno Domini, or after the birth of, essentially, in the years of the domination or the rulership of Jesus Christ. And that BCE would be before the Common Era, and that CE would be the Common Era. Now the question is, what exactly is the Common Era? Well, the answer is that the dates didn't change. In, 0 CE or 1 CE, or however you want to look at that, you're still looking at what used to be called 1 AD. All right, and the same thing applies to BC, and it works the same way. It still counts backwards. Nobody wanted to change the calendar, mind you. They just wanted to change the naming conventions that were used. And the same thing has happened, of course, to the celebration of Christmas. Most Christians hold Christmas to be at least the celebration of the birth of Jesus called Christ. That's what they count it to be. What is Christmas today? Well, it depends on who you ask, but it's become more and more obfuscated over the course of time. First, we introduced Santa Claus into the mix. Good old Santa Claus. Well, there's only one problem. That season was not about Santa Claus. Regardless of whether there was a Santa Claus or was not, whether he was a good guy or whether he wasn't, whether he was truly a saint or whether he wasn't, the fact is Christmas was intended to be about what one would expect based on the name Christ. That is, Jesus, called Christ, the Christian third part, if you will, of God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? So that's kind of unfortunate. And of course, the same thing is true for Easter. We went from Jesus having arisen from the grave in a miraculous event where everyone was in awe, and it's an amazing story, and it shows the sovereignty of Jesus, to an Easter bunny, Easter eggs, Easter hunts, egg dyeing, rolling eggs, etc., etc., all of these things that we do. The same also applies to Halloween. If you assume that Halloween is in fact All Hallows Eve or All Saints Day's Eve, which it may or may not be these days. I can't even say. I haven't looked at the calendar to see how that works. First of all, I don't even agree with All Saints Day, much less Halloween. But the fact of the matter is, the day that is currently celebrated as Halloween is celebrated with the giving of primarily candy to costumed children. That's though these days, of course, even that's going away of the dinosaur. But the point is, Halloween these days is really no longer viewed as a day in which the saints are celebrated, or the day before this day in which the saints are celebrated. The same thing, by the way, is true for things like World War II. Let's step out of Christianity for just a second. The same thing is true for things like World War II. If you ask most people what World War II was about, Most of them will focus on the horror of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which truly were horrific events. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say otherwise. They'll some of them still will talk about what happened to the Jews and what is considered the Holocaust, right? I don't know how I feel about the term the Holocaust, but I know this. Millions and millions of Jews, as far as anyone can tell, were killed by Germany because of supposed ought against them had by at least the leader of Germany at the time, Adolf Hitler. And really, one could argue that the Germans, whether they were just following orders or not, had some sort of problems as well, and were just going along with the plan one way or another. By the way, the same concept of obfuscation, as far as I'm concerned, applies to both the Chinese and the Russian, and by the way, for that matter, the Cuban, right, communist revolutions, in which untold numbers of people died in both the revolutions themselves and the actions that followed. And oh, by the way, I'll point something out. I'm pretty sure that if you look at the official acronyms for China and what was the US, I know for the USSR, right, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, it wasn't even communism. That's not to say that I support or defend communism on that basis. I don't really think the idea of communism is a whole lot better. It's just that in my way of looking at things from a freedom perspective, they're on opposite ends of the scale. Communism ostensibly ultimately ends in no real rule occurring except rule by the people themselves, which, by the way, interestingly enough, is what the United States claims to have. But the point here, the simple point here, is that the Communist Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, and what happened in Venezuela, right, with Maduro and so forth, all of these things are viewed with a filter that obfuscates what actually happened during those time frames. And by the way, it's not just historical. I have a challenge. My challenge to you is find anything that Donald Trump did for which he was criminally convicted, or actually the impeachment process was completed to the point where he was removed from office. Oh, you can't. There isn't one. You can certainly say that he did things civil, and I'm not even trying to argue that, for which he was found to have liability. That's absolutely apparently true, which, by the way, it is for lots of people who are well off and who do all kinds of things that are considered far-reaching, right? But the point is that this obfuscation that is occurring is not just historical, though obviously it'll be read into the historical record, as it were, in the course of time. But getting back to my sort of original point, my original point is this. People are intent on erasing certain things from history, or at least changing the nature or the way in which they are viewed. And the perfect example to that is almost everything Christian. Christmas, Easter, Halloween, Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, none of these things appear to be what they were originally intended to be. So St. Patrick's Day and St. Valentine's Day were supposedly the celebration of these two saints, Valentine, and which probably was Valentin or similar, I don't know for sure, and Patrick, who was the patron saint of Ireland and various other things, I suppose. I'm not even particularly clear. Again, I don't really support the idea of sainthood. So none of this means a whole lot. That part means a whole lot to me. But when you talk about things like Christmas, and when you talk about things like Easter, right? And again, I'm not even a fan of Halloween, but when you talk about things like Christmas and Easter and what they mean to most people, the answer is they don't mean anything particularly substantial to most folks, and even Christians tend to underplay what they were supposed to be about. And this is a function, in my opinion, by the way, this is also true for the CE, BCE versus AD, BC thing. And this is true, in my opinion, because people are trying to erase certain things that are inconvenient to a humanist worldview. That's primarily what it's about. All right, I need to go ahead and wrap this up. As I've said, today is Sunday, the 17th of January of 2021. That means tomorrow will be Monday, the 18th of January 2021, and it will be the celebration of the birth of Martin Luther King Jr. I think he did some interesting things. I'm not quite so sold on him as a lot of people are, but I think he did some interesting things and some important things regardless. That having been said, though, I'm going to try and get out another Daily Summation video and podcast on that day, on the 18th. And hopefully we will get together at that time. I wanted to wish you a good, hopefully for you, long weekend. And I wanted to hope for the best of days for you, whether you're getting old like me or you're young. I hope you're having a good year so far this year. And I hope everything is going well for you. And hopefully we will see you again tomorrow. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on Sunday, the 17th of January of 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S. .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.